And our opening words are by Teresa Gusillo Gallardo. Let us reach the place of self, the place that is not alien to truth. Let us wash over with peace and serenity, with fierce longing for light and heart, with living strength flowing in our veins, bring ourselves into fearlessness and into trust. May it be so. This morning's prayer is by Judith Corliss. How shall we pray? First, let us be open to the silence. Let us hear the sounds in this room, the noises outside, the comfortable murmur of voices. Let us begin to hear the soft beating of our hearts. And let us listen intently for messages from within. Next, let us feel gratitude for our lives and for our beautiful earth. As hard as life gets, as sad or lonely as we sometimes feel, let us always be warmed by the gifts of this life. Next, let us hold in our hearts all those, known or unknown, who are in need. May we find in ourselves the energy and knowledge to bring care to the world. And finally, let us be aware of the blessing that it is not ours alone to do the work of the world. Love and community work wonders that we by ourselves could never manage. In this time of silence, let us form our own prayers out of the concerns of our hearts and lift them silently as we sit together. Our reading this morning is entitled Standing in the Stream. I am caught up in a flowing river, led by currents stronger than myself, floating on assumptions, expectation, anticipation. I am consumed more than carried by the water. It takes me. I make my body supple to navigate the rocks without injury. Weightless, I am being drawn toward the ocean. Although I don't see it, the destination feels inevitable. The current, unrelenting. It takes me. Briefly, I wonder if I might drown, if I will be pulled under by the momentum. Certainly, I will be drawn into the sea. I allow myself to be taken until, as if newly aware of the heft of my own being, I reach down through the water, underneath the current. Putting my foot down, I sense there is a bottom where, grounded, I can stand against the stream. From this pulpit, I often talk about life as a journey. I've compared life to a choose-your-own-adventure book. But I know that sometimes life does not feel at all like a choose-your-own-adventure book. That sometimes it feels as if the story we are living out was written entirely by someone else. Or that even if we began as the authors of our own destiny, the momentum of our story sometimes feels stronger than our ability to change the course of it. We get caught up in habits, lifestyles, career paths, relationships, thought patterns, even mistakes, that seem so set, so fixed. Caught up in the momentum of our lives, it sometimes feels that continuing on in the same way is the only way. My colleague Anita Farber Robertson told me this story about her wedding day. The ceremony had just started and she was standing at the back of the church in her white bridal gown. The guests were all seated, the groom and the minister and the bridesmaids were all lined up in front. The music was playing. And just before they opened the doors for her big entrance, her father turned to her and said, "We don't have to do this, you know." "We could leave right now if you want to." They didn't. But I love that story. There are times when we are so powerfully drawn in by the momentum of our lives that we feel like the only option is to go forward on the path that we are on. But what Anita's dad knew was that even with 100 people waiting expectantly on the other side of the door, even with embarrassment looming, or a pile of presents to be returned, even with the weight of expectation of family and society, even if it will make a lot of people angry, we don't have to do this. Now, I officiate a lot of weddings, so truly, I am not advocating for runaway brides. What I'm advocating for is remembering that each moment, each breath, offers us an opportunity to change course. Remembering that our destinies, our life paths, our attitudes are not set in stone. That we don't have to do this, whatever this is. If life is a journey, pretend with me for a moment that you are taking that journey in a car. You are driving along. You have your GPS system navigating, and she is telling you, take a right here, a left there. And suddenly you glance at the little map, and the arrow showing you where you are is not on the blue line marking your desired route anymore. You're off course. And what does that little voice in the machine say? Recalculating. It doesn't say, okay, Buster, I guess we're going to Canada now. No. It says recalculating. And it finds you another way. I mean, sometimes the other way is a complete U-turn. But there is always another way. When you take a minute to recalculate, to interrupt the way things have been going. When we feel pulled and carried by the expectation of those around us, or by our own fears, or even by our inertia, we don't have to go along with it. Not if we can recalculate. Blaine Smith writes, life is far from an exact science. We invariably come to points where we realize that a situation or a goal we've chosen to pursue just isn't working for us. Sometimes we even discover that a dream that we've devoted ourselves to doesn't fit us nearly as well as we had hoped. Yet a big part of us resists letting go of it because we've staked our identity on it so strongly. He offers the example of Jason, a talented attorney who, a few years out of law school, realized that his passion for law didn't match that of his associates. By his early 30s, he had determined that his strongest gifts and interests were not in the courtroom at all, but in the classroom. He loved working with his church's youth ministry on weekends. He loved history. He wanted to become a history teacher. Now, deciding that he ought to become a teacher was one thing, Mustering the courage to leave the legal profession was quite another, and it took him 3 years to do it. Changing careers not only meant disappointing his parents, who in addition to encouraging him to become a lawyer had also paid for all of his schooling, but also admitting to others and himself that he had spent years chasing a dream that wasn't right for him. As the teachers out there know, it also meant financial sacrifice, trading a lavish salary for a modest one, and finding a way to fund further education. Jason also had worries about being a good enough teacher and whether he could find a job. Today, his only regret is that he took so long to make the change. It's opened up a much more fulfilling career for him, one that has proven to match his potential remarkably well. Recalculating. In her book, The Dance of the Dissident Daughter, Sue Monk Kidd writes about growing up in the South, about going to charm school to learn the art of the female life, sitting with ankles crossed, pouring tea, letting the boys open the pickle jars. This was her upbringing, and this art of being a polite, well-behaved, generous, and gentle woman was one she mastered. As an adult, she was the perfect lady. One day, Sue was being inducted into a group of women known as the Gracious Ladies. I'm not exactly sure what the criteria was, she says, except that one needed to portray certain ideals of womanhood, which included being gracious and giving of oneself unselfishly. During a high lace ceremony, standing backstage, waiting to be inducted, she felt a stab of discomfort. I thought about the meticulous way we were coiffed and dressed, she said, the continuous smiling, the charm that fairly dripped off of us, the sweet, demure way we behaved. We looked like the world's most proper women. And she thought, what am I doing here? Suddenly, lines from the poem Warning by Jenny Joseph popped into her head and began reciting themselves. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat that doesn't go and doesn't suit me. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. She turned to the woman beside her and said, after we're gracious ladies, does that mean we can't wear purple with a red hat or spit? The woman smiled politely, but appeared vaguely dismayed that someone who'd managed to get into the group had just said the word spit. It's from a poem, Sue explained. I see, she said. Obviously, she didn't see, but Sue Monk Kidd did. She saw in that moment, and then again in countless others on her journey, that the person she was, the person she'd learned to be over a lifetime, could change. She was inducted as a gracious lady, but that was not where she wanted to stay. She wanted to give birth to the woman inside of her that was strong and creative and powerful, the one who didn't worry so much about what other people thought of her, who could choose when to be selfless and when not to be, and who knew how to spit. Recalculating. Now, these are some pretty major life changes, switching career tracks, deciding to shake off values of womanhood that no longer feel authentic or life-giving. But remember, this recalculating tool is available to us in each moment, the big ones and the little ones. When we've made a judgment about someone, and then they do something that surprises us. Recalculating. When we're in a bad mood and our negative energy is snowballing. Recalculating. When we've told everyone in the world that we are never going to date again, recalculating. When we walk into a room of people and our fears have convinced us that it's too scary to reach out and talk to someone, recalculating. Those of us who have struggled or are struggling with alcohol or smoking or drugs or overeating know the powerful momentum of our addictions. Professionals who work with addictions often offer tools to help stop the momentum of addiction and craving. Flicking your finger a number of times. Pausing every time you see a certain color. Calling a sponsor. Going to a meeting. These are all tools for helping ourselves to change course, to recalculate over and over and over again. In an article called How to Challenge Negative Thinking and Anxiety, Helen Murphy Howell offers a tool for overcoming the negative thoughts that can take over our minds and attitudes with their powerful momentum. She says, when I want to block a negative thought, I visualize a large red X sign being stamped on the thought to stop it. She says some people use symbols like a door shutting or pulling a curtain across to block the thoughts. And she encourages people to create their own symbols. It may seem a bit silly at first, she says, but if it works, who cares? I was glad that I've been reading and thinking about this topic this week because I spent some time this weekend with my 7-year-old niece, and she has been having trouble sleeping. So when we were playing outside, I talked to her about it. At night, she pictures scary images, and she can't get them out of her head. You know what Harry Potter does when he sees scary things? I asked her. He pictures them doing something silly or wearing a funny hat. I'm not sure if I was all that helpful. Lots of people have been giving me suggestions, Aunt Kate, she said, but they don't work. Well, keep on trying them, I said, because eventually one of them might. And it's a long life without any sleep. The term momentum that I've been using a lot this morning is a physics concept. Newton's first law of motion says that any object moving will continue moving unless it is interfered with. The momentum of an object will never change if it is left alone. To stop such an object, it is necessary to apply a force against its motion. As the force acts upon the object for a given amount of time, the object's velocity is changed. The object's momentum is changed. All of the things I've talked about this morning, all of the tools offered by psychologists and addiction counselors and well-intentioned aunts, we're all saying the same thing. We're acknowledging that life has momentum, that societal expectations and addictions and thoughts of scary monsters have velocity that's real and hard to measure. And we're acknowledging that we have within ourselves the power to interrupt that momentum by applying force. Any force that works for us. We reach out in prayer to a higher power. We reach inside in prayer to a higher power. Momentum is strong, but so are we. If we put our feet down under the current, we will find a way to stand against the stream. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be.